Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening and welcome to Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Mark Dolan.
Why should she lose it?
Because she is fully complicit in the scandal. People have taken their own lives. People have been robbed of their lives, their mental health. It's disgraceful.
So the neighbours of ex-Post Office chief Paula Venables are rightly furious. She has handed back her CBE. So should Ed Davey return his knighthood? I'll bring you the latest on the scandal that shames Britain next. Later this hour, former Lord Chancellor Sir Robert Buckland makes a rallying call for action in Parliament. Yes, indeed, and quite rightly so, as a Channel 4 diversity row, meanwhile, breaks out over appointing 4 white directors. Are there too many white people in top jobs in Britain? And after it all kicked off with Richard Tice last night,
it's even more important that if someone does a bad job running the country, breaking the country, we, the voters, have got to fire them.
yes, it was a right royal ding-dong. What's going to happen tonight when I'm joined by the one and only Nigel Farage? Is he going to join Reform UK officially to spearhead yet another political revolution? I'll be asking. And will this man be our next Prime Minister? Sir Keir Starmer say the Sun worked for free as a lawyer to, wait for it, save baby killers and axe murderers. It raises big questions and my panel will be answering those. Tonight on the sofa, Nana Akua, Ranil Jayawardena, MP, and Rebecca Reid. It's cold out there, but we're bringing the heat. Get the kettle on. Let's get to work. I'll be dealing with Keir Starmer at 10 o'clock. You won't want to miss it. But email me now. Has the Post Office scandal wiped out your faith in Britain's justice system? Mark at gbnews.com. Lots to get through, but first the headlines and Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, has told GB News today he won't be handing back his knighthood over the Post Office scandal, despite being the minister in charge at the time. It follows the former Post Office boss, Paula Venables, handing back her CBE with immediate effect today. There were widespread calls for her to do so after the Horizon IT scandal. More than 700 Post Office staff were convicted, jailed and bankrupted. Some even took their own lives after the faulty software meant they were wrongly accused of theft. Meanwhile, Fujitsu, the parent company of Horizon, has been called to answer MPs' questions next week over its role in the scandal. The Prime Minister says Fujitsu will be held accountable, legally or financially, if it's found to have made mistakes. And the Business Minister, Kevin Hollinrake, said today plans to speed up compensating victims will be announced very shortly. More than 110 flood warnings remain in place tonight, just as the UK prepares for an Arctic blast to strike the country throughout next week. The Met Office says there's another cold night on the way tonight as well, with temperatures dropping widely to close to or below freezing. The Health Security Agency has issued an amber cold health alert, triggering help responses for vulnerable people in parts of southern England. It follows Storm Henk, which left large areas of ground flooded last week, with livestock trapped and thousands of properties damaged. The former US President Donald Trump said today he shouldn't be punished for trying to overturn the 2020 US election. His lawyers argued that allowing a former president to be charged would set a dangerous precedent, paving the way for politically motivated indictments. Nominating the Republican candidate for president begins on Monday in the United States, and Mr. Trump is widely expected to win the state of Iowa, but he'll still need to overcome a series of legal challenges if he's to retake the White House. Now, some news just reaching us in the last half hour or so. Hooded gunmen have burst into a television studio in Ecuador. If you're watching on television, we can show you these pictures of the live TV set, which show masked people, some waving guns, inside a television station in the port city of Guayaquil in the southwest of Ecuador. Gunmen were seen telling staff to lie down and sit on the floor with multiple gunshots and yelling, "No police." It's after Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa declared a state of emergency following the escape of one of the country's most notorious drugs gangs bosses from prison. The National Police is sending specialist units to the television station, and we'll keep an eye on that for you. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app, this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Thanks, Polly. Good evening. When you think of great British institutions, what do you think of? The royal family? An early morning fry-up? Village cricket? A few jars down the pub? All of those, definitely. But you also think of the Great British Post Office, the beating heart of the community. For example, we love our posties, don't we? They go out in all weathers, often wearing shorts in the cold winter months, delivering packages, letters, whistling a cheery tune and facing the daily threat of an angry dachshund or chihuahua. How sickening, therefore, to think that the management of our beloved post offices, those postmasters who are like family to their customers, have been subjected to what some are describing as the greatest miscarriage of justice in the history of this country. Over 700 people accused of stealing from their employers when in fact it was faulty software all along. It's not true that the media did not report the scandal at the time. Well done to the Times newspaper, the Telegraph, the Mail, the Sun, the Mirror and many others for publishing countless stories about what was happening. But in the end, it will be a drama on ITV that ultimately drew the nation's attention to the horrors of what occurred. For the story to have been ignored for so long is a further slap in the face to those accused. They were victims at the time with these false charges, and victims all over again when they were gaslit, bullied and ignored. Whilst the ITV drama is a triumph of acting and storytelling, the real-life drama is just as compelling and is ongoing. What will be the fate of the Leader of the Opposition, Sir Ed Davey, of course, leader of the Lib Dems in particular? He ignored pleas for help from postmasters whilst he was Post Office Minister. He even told GB News today that he won't be returning his knighthood because he was, quote, misled and lied to. Should Sir Keir Starmer have stepped in to block the legal action of the Post Office whilst Director of Public Prosecutions? Well, I'll be dealing with Starmer and his history as a lawyer in my 10 p.m. monologue, and I'm not pulling my punches. But there is some positive news today. The person who was in charge of the Post Office at the time, Paula Venables, has said that she's truly sorry and has handed back her CBE. Although something tells me she'll be hanging on to her £400,000 bonus that she got when she left the company. Venables buckled under intense public pressure, and the feeling was particularly strong among her neighbours when our brilliant roving reporter Ben Leo caught up with some of them earlier today.
I think she should get rid of it now. I think it should be revoked based on what a lot of people are saying. I mean, it is a bit of a scandal.
Should Paula Venables be stripped of her CBE? A million people have signed the petition. Rishi Sunak has said that she should be looked at. What do you think?
I totally agree, and I think in the position that she's in, also with her being a minister as well, and her values and her ethics, then yeah, absolutely.
Why should she lose it?
Because she is fully complicit in the scandal. People have taken their own lives. People have been robbed of their lives, their mental health. It's disgraceful.
There you go, the common sense of the British people. GB News revealed today that the government is finally set to introduce a bill to clear the victims and quash their convictions. But why did it take so long? This was a political failure, a business failure and a legal failure. And in terms of the victims, we're not just talking about the financial distress caused, ruined careers, wrongful prison sentences, wrecked families, health issues and public humiliation. People took their lives. So for the Post Office and the public institutions that failed to hold them to account, I think it's fair to say they have blood on their hands. Not to mention the giant software company Fujitsu, who still continue to enjoy government contracts worth £200 million a year. Talk about rewarding failure. The culture at the Post Office and their behaviour was truly reprehensible. They lied, they were cruel, they were heartless, and they never acknowledged their mistake. They covered up and they obfuscated. The murky handling of this shocking scandal would have the Chinese Communist Party blushing. So, we need rapid justice for all of the victims now, with fast-tracked pardons. And compensation should run into the tens, if not hundreds of millions. And all of those individuals involved in this Post Office scandal should be sent packing, preferably by recorded delivery. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com. Let's get the thoughts of my brilliant panel tonight. We are coming in hot with GB News star Nana Akua, former Environment Secretary, Conservative MP Ranil Jayawardena, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Rebecca, where do you start with a story like this? A human tragedy and a double insult to the victims, ignored and gaslit, and still they don't get justice.
Absolutely, and I think there's a figure, and I can't remember exactly what the number is for the compensation, which sounds enormous, but actually when you work out how many people were affected by this and then you split it amongst them, it's actually not even that much money.
Yeah.
So people's lives were ruined, a pregnant woman was in prison, and the amount of compensation that they're currently being offered is not actually life-changing money, and it should be. None of these people should ever have to work ever again, the ones who are still alive, and there are people who are unfortunately no longer with us.
If this happened in the United States, every single one of those 700 people would be multi-millionaires.
And they
right
should
now.
be. I think they should be more litigious, because the only way that people learn is when you hit them in the pocket. And I think the Fujitsu should be absolutely terrified, because I think the national mood, it's one of those stories where it's not a left thing, it's not a right thing, it's a right and wrong thing. And everyone knows that what happened was wrong.
No, Rebecca raises a great point there. This hasn't been, for a rare occasion, it's not political, it's not left versus right. We're united in our horror at what happened to these people.
Well, we're united in our horror, but it is typical of this country, because it's always lessons will be learned. I mean, how many inquiries have we got going at the moment? The infected blood scandal, that's still going. People are dying as we're talking about it. We've had the COVID inquiry. Now, that's got, what, 10 more years to run or whatever. It's absurd. I think out of this, we need to learn that we cannot have these ongoing, rolling inquiries that go on and on for years. I think the government need to stop doing this. There needs to be a limit to the time period for this. But the people who are involved in this, I think some of them should be in prison. And as for Ed Davey, if he thinks that he's going to hang on to his leadership role, I don't think so. Nobody would be looking at wanting to vote for the Liberal Democrats if he's at the helm. I'm afraid the fact that he's defiant and thinking that he's going to cling on to his Sir Ed Davey. No, Ed. You need to sort yourself out. This is not acceptable. You was he Post Office Minister between 2010 and 2012? To the midst of all of this, and he refused to see people who wanted to talk to him about the scandal. Ed, I'm sorry, but it's curtains.
Now, you're calling him Ed Davies, so have you already officially stripped him of his knighthood?
I have stripped him in my mind of his knighthood. Not stripped him in my mind. For God's sake, people.
No way. You're not that desperate.
No.
Listen, this is obviously has political implications, doesn't it? Potentially for Keir Starmer as a former Director of Public Prosecutions. What about Ed Davey? Do you think his position is tenable? I mean, you are a Conservative MP, so, you know, we ought to understand you've got skin in the game. But what is your view?
Well, so I'm, as you say, I'm slightly biased on this front. But, you know, I come back to two key points. First, Sir Ed Davey was Post Office Minister. His party will be responsible for deciding whether they should continue to be led by him. But as you say, there's another knight who also has a role here. Sir Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions. He could have had, at any time, under a law from 1985, taken over these prosecutions, decided that they were not viable, that there wasn't the evidence that the Post Office was saying, and scrapped them. and he didn't. And I think questions need to be asked of him too. So you were right when you said the leader of the opposition earlier, because I think Keir Starmer has questions to answer as well.
Although, is that wise after the event, given the fact that it was the Post Office senior management who were lying through their teeth? Why is that Keir Starmer's fault? Why is that Ed Davey's fault?
Yeah, so fair point. The challenge back would be you can't suddenly have from no one committing any fraud or no material fraud in the post office, no material thefts in the post office from these sub-postmasters to suddenly huge volume of these cases. How has that happened overnight? Why have they all suddenly decided to do this on the same day, in the same year, as a result of this system change? What was it that in the human behaviour that could have caused that? Clearly nothing. It was the system. And I'd have thought a DPP might have looked at that. So I think there is a question there for Sir Keir Starmer to answer.
Interesting answers. There's plenty more, isn't it? Well, we're going to return to this with the papers at 10:30 because I've got a good steer that this is dominating tomorrow's headlines. Can I say I'm not one for cancel culture, but you do have to wonder about the position of Ed Davey. I'm not sure I'm on record as ever calling for someone to lose their job, but do you think he's gone too far on this occasion with his handling as the Post Office Minister of those postmasters and their genuine concerns? Has he got blood on his hands? I know it's strong language, but people did take their lives. Let me know your thoughts. Should he stay or should he go? Mark at gbnews.com. Now we've got a statement from the former boss of the Post Office, Paula Venables, not a CBE anymore. And she said, I continue to support and focus on cooperating with the inquiry and expect to be giving evidence in the coming months. I have so far maintained my silence as I considered it inappropriate to comment publicly while the inquiry remains ongoing. And before I have provided my oral evidence, I am, however, aware of the calls from sub-postmasters and others to return my CBE. I've listened and confirmed that I do return my CBE with immediate effect. I'm truly sorry for the devastation caused to the sub-postmasters and their families whose lives were torn apart by being wrongly accused and wrongly prosecuted as a result of the Horizon system. I now intend to continue to focus on assisting the inquiry and will not make any further public comment until it has concluded. There you go. Well, that's her view. What is yours? Let me know. But still to come, there's been a big reaction to my on-air row with Reform UK leader Richard Tice last night.
It's even more important that if someone does a bad job running the country, breaking the country, we the voters have got to fire them.
Well, Nigel Farage has been tipped to return to frontline politics with Reform. I'll be asking whether he's going to spearhead yet another political revolution. And more importantly, am I in trouble with Nigel? Find out shortly. But next up in the head-to-head, as a Channel 4 diversity row breaks out over the appointment of 4 white directors to the board, are there too many white people in top jobs in Britain? Stick around to see what will be a furious debate. This is Patrick Christys, Mark Dolan with you all week on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
You're watching Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Mark Dolan, with you all week. Lovely to have your company. Nigel Farage still to come, reacting to my on-air ding-dong with Richard Tice last night, the leader of Reform UK. A big reaction to the start of the show, our debate about the post office scandal and whether Sir Ed Davey should lose his knighthood and whether he should stand down as leader of the Liberal Democrats. This from Colin. Hi, Mark. All about me, Ed Davey should be giving the knighthood back. He should resign. Then he should be prosecuted. Then he should be jailed with all the other disgusting people in this scandal. Get a big cell. There must be loads of them. There you go. Harsh words from Colin. Sarah, he has absolved himself of any blame when he should have challenged and not just accepted what he was told. There were too many things that were just not right. I've got to say, I'm struggling to find any support for Ed Davey at this stage, but do keep that feedback coming, Mark, at gbnews.com. It's time now for the head-to-head. Do love that little ding-dong bell. Channel 4 is tonight locked up in a diversity row after Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser approved the appointment of 4 white directors to their board. 14 out of 15 board members will now be white, which falls short of their overall target for 20% of staff to be from ethnic minorities. It prompted the corporation's chairman, Sir Ian Cheshire, to raise concerns. It's also now emerged that ministers actually blocked an ethnic minority woman, the former BBC exec Rosina Breen, from becoming a director. And Breen has hit out, telling the Deadline online newspaper representation is essential. And the all-too-live reality is that women of colour, especially in particular, face multiple barriers. More diverse senior decision-makers are essential if broadcasting is to become a genuinely inclusive industry. So tonight I'm asking, are there too many white people in British boardrooms? Let me know your thoughts. Mark at gbnews.com. Tweet me at gbnews. I'll bring you the results of the poll shortly. But to debate this, I'm delighted to welcome the Conservative commentator Aman Bogal and the anti-racism activist Ken Hines. Brilliant. Let's start with you, Ken, if I could. Your reaction to this development?
I'm in total agreement that we need more diverse representation on Channel 4. I am very concerned that what we've got going on here is a whitewash. Now, it's so discouraging for people like me who grew up on this racist banter that we're not good enough. And so certain industry weren't for people like myself. So I didn't look to go to the city. I didn't look to play tennis. I didn't look to play golf. That has an effect on my confidence. I feel in 2024, it should be a platform where the young people from the black minority community should be able to not only dream the dream, but live the dream. And when we don't see people like us in the top boardroom because it's a whitewash, then that causes serious concern to me.
I didn't realise that we've changed our cast list for tonight. And in fact, I'm delighted to say we've got Albi Amankona, who is, of course, a GB News presenter and political commentator. Albi, lovely to have you on the show. Thank you for stepping in at the last minute. Do you agree with what Ken had to say there?
No, I don't agree with what Ken had to say. In the specific instance of Channel 4, they've appointed 5 new people to the board. One of the 5 new directors of the board is from an ethnic minority background, a chap called Tom Adeyula. And I personally, as a black person, would hate to think that I had got a job just because I was black. What we should be doing when we are employing people is employing people based on their merits, based on who is best for the job, not just based on how someone looks. And I think it's actually quite regressive for people to say that we should be appointing people just because they're black or just because they're a woman or just because they're gay. And if we actually look at the appointments process of this board, they actually appointed someone to the board who is from an ethnic minority background. So that disproves this whole idea that Channel 4 or indeed the Culture Secretary is somehow racist.
Now, Ken, listen, before I come back to you, let me put a point to you, because I'm very, a great believer in diversity, of course, in all matters. But this particular set of rules at Channel 4 is quite absurd, because a certain percentage of people have to be disabled. Why is that? Why is a disability somehow a necessary, condition of employment? Also, people of a certain sexuality. Who cares who you're shagging? It's Channel 4. You're there to make television programmes.
I'll tell you why it's so important, because institutionalized racism doesn't just go with to the police. It goes throughout the establishment, throughout Great Britain.
What's racist about Channel 4?
One at a time. Let Ken finish his point. Ken, finish your point and I'll come back to Albi.
Right. And I'm saying that what is so important, positive discrimination will help narrow that gap. And I feel this is a strong case for us to be represented in more than this one as a token, but having a real effect of having a body of people who look like me being on that trustee.
Ken, why this focus on skin colour? Why can't somebody that's Caucasian commission television programmes for an audience of colour?
Because quite simply, when I see that, it triggers me back onto that plantation to saying that the white man can only represent and knows what's best for my community. Why can't I see somebody, or my grandchild see somebody like me in that boardroom? Why must we have to figure it out for ourselves? That we have to be a point of change.
Ken, just doing the mathematics, the UK is perhaps about sort of 20% ethnic, it's only about 82% white. So if the boardroom is 1 in 5 ethnic, well, that does represent the national breakdown.
If we want to move anything forward, we've got to have radical change. We've got to be able to see more people like me in prominent position. It's no different to the football. We see them all playing footballers, but not in management.
Well, Ken, I want to see people that look like you on this show very often, because you're a handsome devil. But I take your points. And Albi, how would you respond to what Ken said there? Ken's talking about change, which society needs.
Well, first of all, one of the things Ken mentioned was that when he sees an all-white board, he thinks of being on a plantation. Well, Ken has never been on a slavery plantation in his life. He's far too young for that. Look, the point is we have seen a step change in this country in terms of having ethnic minority representation in high positions. Our Prime Minister is from an ethnic minority background. We had a black Chancellor last year. We have the most diverse cabinet in history. One of the 5 new board members who has been appointed by Channel 5 is from an ethnic minority background. I don't think Ken would be happy unless all 5 of them had been appointed from ethnic minority backgrounds, which is just obviously isn't a practical thing. We've got to be putting people in jobs who are the best at those jobs. We shouldn't be employing people because of how they look, because of who they're sleeping with, because of whether or not they're male or female. We should be employing the best people for the job. And Ken's method, Ken's ideal society is not based on merit, it's based on how people look, and that's just not practical.
What do you think, Ken? How do you respond to what Albie had to say there?
Look, he mentioned the Prime Minister. I'm not looking for a gold digger. I'm looking for gold. And my thing is simple. Albie says there is quite, I think, quite disingenuous, because of the simple fact is I'm not talking about just a person of colour. I'm talking about the person who has the necessary expertise and qualification to sit on there. And you can't tell me we can't find people like that out there in our community.
I mean, can I say to you, Ken, is it not patronising to ethnic individuals if they're there to tick a box? I mean, I don't imagine you tick boxes. You're on this show because of your ability to convey your views and your experience as a commentator. Do you really want to be the token man of colour at Channel 4 or anywhere else?
I thought I was on here for my good looks. But anyway, that's my bad.
There is that.
So yeah, but personally, as I said before, not only just for the presence, but also for what I bring to the table, and that is through my lived experience. Because all too often, when we have to go through a third party can't give the same kind of weight of argument that someone who's lived that experience could. And I think that's very important to bring into that boardroom.
OK, and listen, a final thought, Albie, on this idea of sexuality, the idea that if you're trans, you identify as a different gender, or if you're gay or bisexual, that somehow that qualifies you for a place on the Channel 4 board. Is that progress?
No, I don't think it is progress. Look, Channel 4 has made some exceptional television content in the LGBTQ space. I think of It's a Sin. They've not been trying to employ people who are gay in order to create this content. What should matter are the merits of people and how good they are at their job. How good are they at writing scripts? How good are they at casting? How good are they at acting? Not whether or not they're gay, whether or not they're black, whether or not they're a woman. It should be based on the merits, and that goes for racial background and also sexuality as well.
What a fantastic debate. Gentlemen, thank you so much for furthering this conversation. The anti-racism activist Ken Hines and GB News presenter and political commentator Albie Amankona. Thank you, chaps. So who do you agree with as a Channel 4 diversity row breaks out over its appointment of 4 white directors? Are there too many white people in the boardroom? Steve on X says, I don't care about the colour of people's skin, it's their ability to do the job, and I think most others agree. Why bring colour into it? Isn't that racist? Dave says, yes, there absolutely is. There are simply too many white people in the boardroom. Peter says, talent and qualifications over race or colour, and your verdict is in now. 4% agree that there are too many white people in British boardrooms. 96% say there are not. A spokesman for the Department for Culture, Media and Sport has said the government is committed to advancing equality of opportunity. Appointments to the Channel 4 board were made by Ofcom following a fair and open competition with approval from the Secretary of State, Lucy Fraser. OK, folks, coming up, Sir Robert Buckland, the former Justice Secretary, says there is no time to lose for overturning all Post Office convictions. But can we still trust the British justice system? The former Lord Chancellor has strong words for his fellow politicians. He joins me shortly. And my heated confrontation with Richard Tice last night has got people talking.
It's even more important that if someone does a bad job running the country, breaking the country, we the voters have got to fire them.
Well, Reform UK is surging up in the polls, so is Nigel Farage going to join the party and lead the next political revolution? I saw off Tice last night, but what about Nigel? He's next. You're watching Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Mark Dolan, on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In my monologue at 10, I'll be dealing with the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, and his rather murky legal career and why it matters, because, of course, he's likely going to be our next Prime Minister. Well, one day, it could be Nigel Farage, who joins me now. And Nigel, great to have you back on the show. I had quite the ding-dong with your friend and colleague at Reform UK, Richard Tice. Take a listen. Studio. Hello, Richard.
Very good evening, Mark. Now, listen, you're behind the times, my friend. Richard Littlejohn in the Daily Mail, I think we may have it on the screen, last Friday, he quite rightly put up the headline, maybe the Tories should stand down in favour of Reform UK, because head-to-head, I beat Keir Starmer any day of the week. But you're thinking old school, Mark. What's going on here? Why are you trying to perpetuate failure? You have to punish incompetence and failure. If you do a bad job presenting, you get fired.
Most definitely.
It's even more important that if someone does a bad job running the country, breaking the country, we, the voters, have got to fire them.
Well, Nigel, great to see you again. I haven't seen you since your triumph in the jungle. Congratulations on that. Now, of course, in his first major interview of the year, speaking to the Telegraph newspaper, Rishi Sunak was talking about you. He said that a vote for Farage is a vote for Starmer, something I echoed in my Take at 10 on Sunday night. And that was the debating point last night with Richard Tice. Do you think that both I and Rishi Sunak have a point? You're going to hand the keys of number 10 to Keir Starmer.
Oh, you're all so boring.
I've been hearing this election after election for the last 25 years. Please don't vote UKIP. Don't vote Brexit Party. Please, we're the people. We'll do the job. We'll keep you in the European Union. That was then. But now, Mark, if you want to stay in the ECHR, vote Conservative. If you want legal migration to run at record ever levels, more than double what it was even under Tony Blair, vote Conservative. If you want to be lied to about stopping the boats, vote Conservative. If you want the tax burden to be the highest it's been since 1951, vote Conservative. If you want the state to grow at stunning levels, to be photographed by cameras, to be fined for things you didn't even know you'd done wrong, vote Conservative. If you want to make sure that small businesses are crushed by increasing corporation tax by 30% in one fell swoop and not deregulating at all, despite Brexit, vote Conservative. I think the point I'm making is that they have lied to us. And that's the biggie. That's the biggie. 2019 was an election where not only did I get rid of Mrs. May, but I stood aside for Boris Johnson. I wanted to get Brexit done. Of course I did. And they made a series of promises in that manifesto that they never intended to keep. And now they're saying, look, we know we're useless, but please vote for us because Labour are worse. Boring, boring, boring. Our politics is failing at every level. We need a complete revolution in the way things are.
Nigel, when you say we need a complete revolution, you ought to be taken seriously because you've done it with the debanking scandal, you've done it with Brexit, and you're part of a broadcasting revolution, the front and centre of the broadcasting revolution that is GB News. But what is the Reform UK master plan? Is it replace the Tories over the next 5 to 10 years or merge with them to make them better?
Well, this is not a one-election plan. I mean, let's be clear about that. Richard Tice is not saying vote for us, we'll form the next government. Richard Tice is saying vote for us and let's begin this revolution. We got back self-government, great. Now we have to work out how to use it and how to do it rather more effectively than either Labour or Conservatives can. So it's a long-term game and we'll level with the voters on that. And ultimately, this idea, vote Reform, you'll get Labour. Here's the truth of it. We're going to get Labour anyway. I mean, did you see that today's YouGov had Labour 24 points ahead? So this attempt to try and squeeze the Reform vote won't work because they're doomed. Now, look.
Nigel, 2 quick questions before you go. First of all, I understand the strategy. You'd like to see the Tories destroyed and a proper Conservative movement on the right, and I support that. My concern is the strategy could backfire. A bumper majority for Keir Starmer. He could do amazing damage with 150 seats as a majority. And what about the risk of Labour and a decade in power? Does that not keep you awake at night?
Well, I think Labour have got a decade in power almost written in already. Such is the level of disenchantment at the Conservatives and what they've done. Remember this. In 1974, the Conservative Party lost the election. You would have thought for all the world they were doomed after Ted Heath. But a new political philosophy and a new leader came along in Margaret Thatcher. They were only in opposition for 1 term. The silent majority in this country agree with many of the things, Mark, that you and I agree with. It's part of why GB News is doing as well as it is. I don't know whether the Conservatives are going to be replaced, whether they're going to be changed. What I do know is that Reform is going to play a very important role in realigning the centre-right of British politics to give us a proper choice.
And lastly, Nigel, briefly if you can, are you going to have a frontline role with Reform in the run-up to the next election? Will you become leader? Will you be the chairman? Are you going to be front and centre of this revolution in the run-up to November of next year, the likely election date?
Well, I'm already the founder of the party. I chose the name. I set it up. I'm the president. I'm going to support Ben Habib in the Wellingborough by-election because I think actually it could be a very good wake-up call for the whole Westminster establishment. As to whether I get more deeply involved or not, I don't know. I haven't decided. I'm weighing up all the options. One of those options being that I do enjoy being part of the broadcasting revolution with you and the other guys and girls at GB News. And giving that up would be really quite a big price to pay in many ways. I don't yet know what I'm going to do, but make no mistake, I do think Reform is on the right path over the course of the next 6 years to change British politics in a way that most can't imagine.
OK, Nigel, more power to you. Great to see you again, and we'll catch up soon. GB News superstar Nigel Farage. OK, folks, I'll be dealing with Keir Starmer in my monologue at 10. His murky legal past, it's pretty outrageous. You won't want to miss it. I'm not pulling my punches. But the Post Office next, and former Justice Secretary, strong words. See you in 2.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to the show. Now, at 10 o'clock, you won't want to miss this in my monologue, as the Sun newspaper revealed that Sir Keir Starmer saved axe murderers and baby killers while serving as a top lawyer. I'll be bringing into question his ethics and his judgment as the man that wants to be our next Prime Minister. But first, let's get more on the growing scandal around the Post Office, and let's speak to former Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary Sir Robert Buckland. Sir Robert, thank you so much for your time. What chance is there that the over 700 people falsely and wrongly convicted, prosecuted of stealing money from the Post Office will get exonerated?
Well, I think now the chances grow by the hour, and I think that as Parliament has been discussing this intensively since the revelations got an even wider audience due to that television drama, I think people are now realising the full extent of this scandal and the fact that we're not just talking about people who aren't guilty of any offence, but they are victims themselves of an enormous scandal. And that means that a lot of them just have run out of trust energy, patience with the system, and are not coming forward to get their names cleared. And that's why I think, exceptionally, bearing in mind the scale and nature of what's happened here, Parliament needs to intervene.
Most definitely. Now, if this happened in the United States, I've got no doubt, Sir Robert, that the compensation bill would run into the tens, if not hundreds of millions of pounds. Is there a chance that these victims will get properly compensated?
I think there is and there should be. We're not just talking about financial loss, we're talking about loss of reputation, loss of livelihood, sometimes loss of life. And as the clock ticks on, we're losing more sub-postmasters who are literally dying without justice being done. And that's why I think expunging the convictions opens the door to a much swifter and easier compensation payment system. You know, there are about 90 who've had their convictions overturned. Payments have been made, which is good, but we're talking now about hundreds more who just aren't able to access justice, who feel that they can't trust the system, who don't want to go through the extreme pain of having to clear their name, which is why I think Parliament should legislate to end these convictions and to clear the way for compensation to be paid quickly.
What is the likelihood, do you think, that that will happen?
Well, I think there are two main outcomes here. One, Parliament legislating. Two, the court system itself being resourced to speed up these appeals, to deal with them en masse and to process them through the system in months rather than years. Now, that still requires people to come forward. And I'm not criticising victims for not wishing to put themselves through the maelstrom of a court process again. They've been wounded deeply as it is. And that's why I think the parliamentary option seems to me, in these unprecedented, these unique circumstances, to be probably the most sensible way forward to allow people to have their names cleared without the heartache and soul-sapping experience of having to clear your name.
Sir Robert, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, pushed back whilst Post Office Minister in the coalition government in 2010 on concerns and correspondence from postmasters who said they'd been wrongly accused. His defence is that he was flatly lied to by Post Office management. Is his position still tenable?
Well, look, he's got to answer for that. I think what I would say is that all of us, I think, involved and who care about the justice system need to confess that this is a moment of shame for the system, and we need to look in the mirror and ask ourselves what more we can do to restore that trust. You know, we put confidence in the machine, in IT, in the infallibility of these processes. They were wrong. They failed. We didn't have proper checks and balances to protect people's names. That's the question we've got to ask ourselves. And in a time when the machine now is becoming more part of our daily lives, AI, all these important developments, we've got to make sure that we don't lose our ethical compass along the way, and that innocent people are protected from the vagaries of a rubbish in, rubbish out data system. And that's the real question I think we all need to ask ourselves today.
Does Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, have a case to answer for his handling of this, given that he was Director of Public Prosecutions?
Well, there's no doubt that the CPS and the DPP have the power to take over private prosecutions like the ones we saw in the main from the Post Office and either end them or carry them on themselves. I think that rather than pointing at individuals, it's far better to acknowledge that there's been a systemic failure here. And I think the inquiry of Sir Wyn Williams, the independent former judge who's running that statutory investigation into the systemic failures here, will reveal the full extent of what went wrong from top to bottom. The governance failures, the failures in procurement of this system way back in the late 90s, 98, 99, that's the period we're looking back to, and then coming up with constructive proposals about how we can prevent this sort of disaster, this scandal, from happening again.
Most definitely. Now, the software company at the heart of this scandal is Fujitsu. They still enjoy government contracts worth upwards of £200 million a year. The company itself is valued at £52 billion, Sir Robert. Do you think that they should be paying a higher price for their role in this scandal?
I think inevitably the contract and the management of it by this company will have to be examined. It may well result in litigation itself. And I think clearly government are going to have to ask questions about future contracts that might be awarded and indeed look into what went wrong here. This is what I think the Williams inquiry will establish. And from then, let's hope that we can avoid lengthy and costly litigation, that everybody fesses up to their failure, and that we make sure that the money is going to the people who suffered first and foremost, and then we settle up all these other issues after the victims have been compensated.
Well, but briefly, Sir Robert, do you think that Fujitsu should write a massive cheque by way of apology to those victims?
Well, I think they've got questions to answer, and clearly the inquiry will reveal precisely what went wrong with the management of this contract. And I'm sure, like the Post Office, Fujitsu will bear responsibility for not just the financial cost, but the human cost that this scandal has caused. And therefore, I want everybody to be in a spirit of openness, honesty, in a way that we've frankly not seen during the earlier stages of these prosecutions, and a time for that openness that I think is owed to the victims and their families.
Last but not least, Sir Robert, your reaction to the news, the developing story that the former boss of the Post Office at the time, Paula Venables, has handed back her CBE?
Well, I think that's a right and proper decision. I think there are wider issues about honours being awarded to people involved in this scandal. The Forfeiture Committee is an independent committee, can look at those issues. I would urge them to do so that we can make sure that our system of awards has integrity, that it's being run in a way that inspires public confidence, because we don't want to see a situation where the honour system, the justice system itself, is called into question because of a failure not just to deal with the individual cases that arise from this scandal, but the overall effect that it has upon our confidence in our system of justice, the ability of people to serve in our post offices, which is so important for many viewers, and indeed the integrity of our honours system. All these things are linked, and that's why we need to act to restore that trust.
My thanks to the former Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice, Sir Robert Buckland MP. Now, coming up, I'm going to be dealing with Keir Starmer, who has quite a murky legal career. This is a guy who saved axe murderers and baby killers whilst a top lawyer. We'll be discussing his ethics and indeed his fitness for office. That's Keir Starmer in my monologue at 10 in just a few minutes' time. So a busy hour to come. You're watching Patrick Christys tonight with me, Mark Dolan, on GB News.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. I'm Alex Deakin. Another cold one tonight and tomorrow. Quite a bit more cloud tomorrow over northeast England and eastern Scotland. Sunny skies definitely in the south. High pressure is still dominating our weather. Close to the centre of this high, we've seen some stubborn fog patches. The breeze coming around the high, bringing in a bit more cloud over northeast England and eastern Scotland during the night. Just maybe one or two showers here and there as well. They'll be pretty light, pretty well scattered, and they will be of rain, maybe a little bit of snow on the hills. Further south, it's generally just dry and clear and cold. Temperatures down to -1, -2, even in towns and cities, and feeling colder with that wind, which will be a feature of the weather tomorrow, as it will be over northeast England and eastern Scotland. A cloudy day here as well, so feeling even colder without any sunshine and with that breeze. Again, western Scotland should see quite a bit of sunshine, some sunshine possible for Northern Ireland, and plenty of sunshine across the south. Still one or two scattered showers coming in, and where it is cloudier with a stronger wind, even though temperatures are a little higher tomorrow, it'll probably feel colder, mostly 5 or 6 Celsius, so still below average for the time of year. Another frosty one in the south on Wednesday night and Thursday morning, but again here generally fine and sunny. For most, again, Thursday's looking dry. Again, there's quite a bit of cloud at times in northeast England and eastern Scotland. Temperatures at 6s and 7s, so feeling cold once more, particularly in the east, with a brisk, chilly wind.
Looks like things are heating up. boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Mark Dolan.
One rule for all. That's the principle I've been proud to serve all my adult life. As a human rights lawyer and at the Crown Prosecution Service, as the Director of Public Prosecutions, I prosecuted them all.
But should the Labour leader be so confident? The Sun reports that Starmer worked for free as a lawyer to save baby killers and axe murderers. I'll be asking whether this is the kind of man we want as Prime Minister. I'll be dealing with Keir Starmer next. Plus, as she celebrates her 42nd birthday, is Princess Catherine showing Meghan Markle how it's done? And curiously, Joey Barton yesterday lashed out at the home of free speech, GB News, and this programme, and I am involved. So I'll be dealing with Joey Barton as well. Starmer, Barton, I'll take them both on. We'll also bring you all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press, and there'll be news of long-awaited justice for the post office scandal victims. Plus my press pack tonight. The brilliant Nana Akua, Ranil Jayawardena MP, and Rebecca Reid. So, a big hour of television coming your way. Buckle up, Britain, we're live. Email me now, do you trust Keir Starmer's judgment? We need to have that conversation because he's probably going to be our next Prime Minister. Mark at gbnews.com. Lots to get through, don't go anywhere, but first the headlines and Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom tonight is that the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, has told GB News today he won't be handing back his knighthood over the post office scandal, despite being the minister in charge at the time. It follows the former post office boss, Paula Venables, handing back her CBE with immediate effect today. There were widespread calls for her to return the honour after the Horizon IT scandal. More than 700 post office staff were convicted, jailed, bankrupted, some even taking their own lives after the faulty software meant they were wrongly accused of theft. Meanwhile, Fujitsu, the parent company of Horizon, has been called to answer MPs' questions next week over its role in the scandal. The Prime Minister saying Fujitsu will be held accountable legally or financially if it's found to have made mistakes, with parliamentary sources suggesting the Prime Minister will address the matter in Prime Minister's questions tomorrow. Labour has defended the use of fines to tackle school absence rates. That's according to the Shadow Education Secretary, who says a Labour government would keep the policy in place. Speaking at an event in London, Bridget Phillipson said parents shouldn't take children out of school for cheaper holidays or birthday treats. That's after more than a fifth of pupils in England were persistently absent across the autumn and spring terms of 22 and 23. Now, let's bring you an update on events in Ecuador, where the authorities have regained control of a TV station after hooded gunmen burst onto the set earlier on today. Live television images did show masked men, some waving guns inside the television station. That happening in the southwest of the country, in Guayaquil, in the port city there. It's a day after the country's president declared a state of emergency following the escape of one of the country's most notorious drug gang bosses from prison. Gunmen were seen telling staff to lie down and sit on the floor. Multiple gunshots were fired and no police was being yelled. Police have since confirmed 13 arrests have been made. Here at home, 2023 was the hottest year on record, according to new European data. EU scientists comparing average world temperatures with global records going back to 1850. The European Union's climate service says it was also likely to be the warmest year in the last 100,000 years. And that, as more than 110 flood warnings remain in place tonight, just as the UK prepares itself for an Arctic blast to strike the country throughout next week. The Met Office is saying tonight there's another cold night in store for us tonight. Temperatures widely dropping to close to or below freezing. And the Health Security Agency issuing an amber cold health alert, triggering help responses for vulnerable people in parts of southern England. And it all follows Storm Henk, which left large areas of ground flooded, with livestock trapped and thousands of properties damaged. That's the news on GB News, across the UK on TV, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is Britain's News Channel.
The halo has slipped for St Keir Starmer. Our holier-than-thou, soon-to-be Prime Minister endlessly preaches about how he locked up dangerous criminals as Director of Public Prosecutions. But sadly, that's not the full story. The cervix-free leader of the opposition, famous for his wildly poor political judgment, campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister. He backed a second Brexit referendum. He called for more needless and failed lockdowns, saying he'd rather be with the globalist elite in Davos, Switzerland, than in Westminster. It goes on and on and on. Blimey, I would never go to the races with this guy because he always backs the wrong horse. But whilst in my view he has a history of political misjudgment, in a cracking piece of journalism by the Sun newspaper and their top hacks, Harry Cole and Thomas Godfrey, his moral virtue and certainly his professional ethics are brought into question, as it's revealed that Starmer worked for free as a lawyer for many years to help scores of twisted killers around the world, including a monster who buried his 2-year-old stepchild alive. Now, Starmer supporters will argue this was part of a 20-year legal strategy across the world to get rid of the death penalty. Although why you'd want to preserve the lives of some of the worst human beings the world has ever seen is beyond me. But the Sun have done a deep dive into his legal career and identified multiple sick criminals who reduced their sentences, including Jamaican Lambert Watson, who slaughtered his girlfriend and 9-month-old baby by stabbing them in the neck. Charming. He helped a Malawian murderer who tied up his 2-year-old stepson before burying him alive. And how about the Ugandan axe murderer who slayed his girlfriend in front of her children? Now, barristers operate under what is referred to as the cab rank rule, where they take the next available case that's given to them and serve their clients without fear or favour. By sometimes defending dreadful people, lawyers are simply doing their job and serving justice. But as top barrister Stephen Barrett points out on Twitter today, these are political choices that Sir Keir made as part of a private political campaign. Now, Starmer's people will argue he took no money to represent these people. Well, I think that makes it worse. His defenders say on social media that the convictions against the aforementioned monsters were unsafe because of a lack of legal representation or due process. But the reality is that these monsters, whose crimes are far too egregious to even imagine, they were helped by Starmer, whose brand is all about being the sharing, caring former human rights lawyer. Did he spare a thought for the human rights of the victims of the post office scandal when he failed to intervene in the prosecution of innocent sub-postmasters when he was director of the public prosecutions? I don't think so. So, Starmer sells himself as the good guy. But with this story, I think we've seen the good, the bad and the ugly. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com. To react to all of that, I'm delighted to welcome GB News star Nana Akua, former Environment Secretary, Conservative MP Ranil Jayawardena, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Well, there you go. Are you surprised to hear about Keir Starmer's back catalogue of misjudgment?
Well,
Nana?
I mean, this is the man who presided over the DPS during the whole issue with Jimmy Savile. Obviously, he had no connection with it in that respect, no direct connection with it, but he did head up the division. There's no question about that. But my problem with this is you have this wokerati, these woke so-called do-gooders who are going to help people and so on and so forth. He had a choice as to whether he was going to work with these people, and he chose to do it. If he were a business, then the advertisers would be withdrawing their advertising, because that's how the world is. And I just find it incredible that literally every call he keeps making is wrong, and I'd be afraid to have somebody like that leading this country. It's frightening, the people that he's represented. And yes, he may have been thinking he's doing a good thing by helping mass murderers so that they don't face the full force of what he believes maybe is an inhumane punishment. But at the end of the day, whose side is he on? If you give it to me, I'll be the one who presses the button and allows this death penalty to happen. I would actually bring it back. He doesn't understand the environments that he's dealing in Africa and other places where a lot of it is more brutal and more barbaric. He should stay out of it.
I've got to say, I think you'd make a charming executioner. I think if you had to go, death by Nana, sign me up. Rebecca, do you care to make the case for the defence?
I think it shows how desperately sad and scared a lot of people are of Keir Starmer. There are so many legitimate criticisms of him as a leader of the opposition. I'm frustrated by him in lots of ways. This looks pathetic. This was his job. He openly and clearly believes that the death penalty is wrong. That is his choice. I understand that not everybody feels that way, but Commonwealth countries, that what he was trying to do is bring Commonwealth countries in line with the UK policy where there is no death penalty. Now, that means that there is no death penalty for anyone, no matter how evil they are. All he was doing is trying to overturn the death penalty. That is a perfectly reasonable, legitimate aim. And to use such emotive language to start digging up cases of times where he had to do that in order to get rid of the death penalty or help get rid of the death penalty, it's manipulative and it's childish and it's a bit pathetic. And moreover, one of the great things about this country is our justice system. The post office scandal obviously doesn't speak well of it, but broadly speaking, the right to a fair trial is a beautiful and magical and important thing, and you cannot have that unless you have people willing to defend anybody. The way that you get people in prison is by having good, proper lawyers defending anybody and everybody, so that you can't then overturn trials by suggesting there was no defence. That is what Keir Starmer did.
What about his moral compass, though? Because even if I was doing that, I would be somebody who would say, look, I'm not going to represent people like that. But then my own moral compass.
But then with the greatest, I would be the same, so I would be a terrible barrister. I couldn't be a lawyer because I'd be like, oh, I think you seem like.
But you were saying he was doing his job. But he did this.
He didn't have to do that.
Right, you say
he did have to.
You said
job.
No, you said he was doing his job, but he did this unpaid. This was a political project.
These are two different things. There have been multiple stories about him to do with this. One of them is that he represented unsavoury people in the UK, and one of them is that he helped represent people abroad when he was trying to overturn the death penalty. Now, on the former point, that was his job, he had to do it. On the latter point, he felt the death penalty was wrong. I feel that we might not all agree on that. Personally, I'm anti-death penalty, even for people I personally would like to push on.
Yeah, but with that in mind, Rebecca, if somebody said to you, OK, you don't have to do this, but would you represent this mass murderer?
I think for him, the general...
No, but if it was you, I'm asking you, if it was you wouldn't do it, would you?
I don't know. I mean, I'd be a very bad person to do it because I'm very ill-qualified. But I believe sufficiently in the death penalty being wrong that I would agree that even people who murder children shouldn't be put to death.
But would you do it, though? Because even if I believe...
Would I stand up in court and defend somebody?
Yeah.
I think I'd be more likely to end up...
Briefly, Rebecca, I need to come to Ranil, but what about the fact that the actions of Sir Keir Starmer saw some of these monsters leave jail early, shorter sentences?
The sentence that we were looking at was 19 years, and the guy in question was high on drugs and had some very significant... was basically... was not within their mental
but he still
state.
committed murder.
Oh, no, he's still an evil piece of... He's still an evil piece of word, I won't say.
So he shouldn't get out early because he was taking drugs.
But fundamentally, 19 years is a very long sentence.
OK.
This is
Ranil, over to you.
This is just a glimpse, though, of what a future Labour government would be. You know, I actually have to say I think Rebecca's right in terms of everyone deserves to have legal representation. I get that. He's made a choice here.
Yeah.
And let's set the death penalty aside for a second. He's made a choice here that he wanted to run a political campaign when he was paid by the taxpayer as Director of Public Prosecutions. I think there are questions about that. I think he's chosen to run that political campaign instead of defending the sub-postmasters, because he should have used his spare time when he was DPP to maybe look at some of the cases going on in this country for which he was paid.
But the Commonwealth.
Hang on. He was paid to do Director of Public Prosecutions for England and Wales. That was his job, and he didn't do it. But also, it's you know, frankly, it's not for Britain to decide. And I don't think it's right for the Director of Public Prosecutions for this country to decide what another country's judicial system should or should not have as a penalty. We might have our own views. We might have our own views on all sorts of things. But it's for any other country to make their own decisions.
But briefly, is it not nice to have a potential Prime Minister with deep principles? That's what Rebecca would argue.
Well, deep principles of allowing our sub-postmasters to go to prison so that you could save other people from prison.
I don't think he was aware of that.
And indeed, you know, if you look at some of the other statements he's made as a politician, he wants to bring back new court cases for veterans who served in Northern Ireland, repealing that legislation.
Briefly, Rebecca?
I don't think you can reasonably say that everything that happened while he was working as Director of Prosecutions ends with him, in the same way that you can't say that everything that happened under the Prime Minister, not everything that happened when David Cameron was Prime Minister.
Well, they were quite happy to cascade Boris for everything that happened under his watch.
Who is they? I'm not.
Well, most people, everyone would blame
that doesn't work either.
David.
You cannot blame one person for everything that happens under me.
You're in charge of it. You're paid the six-figure salary. The buck starts with
But then it was the PM's fault with the postmasters, by that logic.
Well, no, he was head of DPS at the time.
But above him is the Prime Minister.
Yeah, but he's in charge of the
But if you say the person in charge is in charge of everything...
Well, let me tell you what we're going to do. Do you know what we're going to do? We're going to pick this up at 10:30, because this story is all over the papers tomorrow. So do stick with us for 10:30 and our press pack, in which we will resume this heated debate. I better crack on, don't want to get in trouble with producer Lucy. We've got a statement from a Labour spokesperson who said, given the number of miscarriages of justice there have been, Sir Keir Starmer does not support the death penalty. OK, folks, tonight's panel of pundits join me to run through the front pages, as I said. Plus, find out why Joey Barton has taken a very public dig at GB News. It involves me and it involves this programme. We'll deal with that very, very shortly. But next, as she celebrates her 42nd birthday, is Princess Catherine showing Meghan Markle how it's done? Plus, should we be worried about a poll showing that public support for the monarchy is below 50% for the first time? Plus, the Prince Andrew latest. All of that next.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back. Editor-at-large of the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths joins me now live in the studio to offer her unrivalled royal insight. So I'm looking forward to this debate. So many stories to get through, and don't forget the papers are on their way. But let's crack on with the Royal Dispatch. There you go, folks. Breaking news. Prince Andrew was spotted for the first time since the release of the Epstein files today, as pressure continues to grow on the disgraced Duke. Andrew, who has vehemently denied all allegations, was seen at the wheel of his car driving away from his home, the Royal Lodge in Windsor, after being named 69 times in the bombshell court documents. There's no suggestion that Andrew or anyone else named in documents had anything to do with the Epstein crimes or had any knowledge of them. But Charlotte, first of all, we've seen him again. What do you think this ordeal is doing to Prince Andrew on a very personal and human level?
Well, on a personal level, he's at a very low ebb. OK, so that's probably obvious, but friends are really saying, seriously, he's at a really low ebb. There were reports today that he was locked in his room for a portion of this week, and Sarah Ferguson's been drafted in to double down on her wifely duty, even though they're not married. She is very much on hand non-stop to just keep him going. But having said that, on Christmas Day, he was videoed in Sandringham, and this video's emerged of him recently, sort of berating his own fans, and on classic Prince Andrew form, being sort of quite boorish and patronising. So sometimes you see a clip like that and you think, well, actually, maybe he's just fine and he's just powering on through and burying his head in the sand. You know, he certainly didn't seem contrite that day, that's for sure.
He's, you know, still a relatively young man. He's a member of a family with excellent genetics. What's he going to do for the next 2 or 3 decades?
I don't know. I mean, this is the question that all of his friends have been asking. And, you know, their big worry is that he can't even really go shooting. He can't. There are some basic things that you can do if you're a sort of posh royal living in the country. And actually, he's been socially outcast from even some of those. So he certainly can't do any charity work or any royal work of any kind, especially now in the light of this second batch of
Well, yeah, I
stuff.
should say that he was, I think, named 67 times in sort of 900 pages.
69 times.
It was 69.
Yeah,
I thought it was 69.
There's the number that everyone chortles
That's
at.
why I corrected it and said 69, yeah. And so, you know, the bottom line is that it's obviously very damning. He's not been found guilty of any of these crimes. He's settled out of court with Virginia Giuffre. Is there a sense that this guy is the victim of trial by media, trial by public opinion? Is there any ounce of sympathy for Prince Andrew?
Oh, there's not much sympathy going around. I mean, Alan Dershowitz has been quite sympathetic this week and said, well, you know, his mum pressured him into settling, and actually, you know, he didn't do it, and he shouldn't have settled. So,
What, with Sarah Ferguson?
No, with Virginia.
Oh, I see.
So,
Sorry, I thought you were talking about the romantic history of Prince Andrew. Settled out of... Yes, and the papers are saying today that if he'd gone to court, he would have won.
He would have won. So I suppose... But, I mean, it's not like everyone's flooding to defend him in light of that. You don't really want Alan to be your only supporter in this world, I don't think. So
yeah.
I think there isn't. But I know what you mean, because he's never actually been found guilty of any of these crimes, and yet there he is in purgatory, you know, locked in his room, unable to conduct his life in any way.
And his pal, Lady Victoria Harvey, a good friend of the show, she says that he's been done up like a right royal kipper.
I know, well, these are his two great defenders, is Lady Victoria Harvey and Alan Dershowitz. You know, they're not the most... I don't know, they're not the
reliable
best
witnesses.
Reliable witnesses. I'm trying to find the most diplomatic way of saying this, but you know, that's it. He's got two people sticking up for him at this point. It's not many, is it?
No, it most definitely isn't. Catherine is now 42.
Yes.
And well, it's a pretty loaded question, but is she showing Meghan Markle how it's done?
The classic Meghan versus perfect princess debate. I think she is showing Meghan Markle how it's done. There was a time in 2018, I think one of your clips showed it earlier, when Meghan and Kate were speaking together in a royal forum, and Meghan was speaking a lot better than Kate, and it started to become very apparent that there was a real risk here that Meghan might outshine Kate in the public speaking arena. But what Kate's done, which is what she's brilliant at, is just stood back, stayed calm, stayed quiet, and just waited for Harry and Meghan to thrash it out, tie themselves in knots, throw lurid accusations her way via their royal biographer, and, you know, apparently it's, you know, via Meghan. And she's just stayed calm, stayed quiet, and she's emerged the victor. And, you know, we always used to tease her, the tabloid media, for being weighty Katie. But actually, it's kind of a positive thing, because she's just waiting it out, and she looks fabulous at 42. She's elegant. And nobody's bringing up the royal racist thing on her birthday today. I mean, I can imagine Meghan Markle might have expected that to come up. But it doesn't, because people sort of admire Kate and think she's fabulous.
Well, this is great news. And actually, it's a year since the publication of Spare, and a lot of those, you know, the sort of the dirty laundry being washed in public. And so she can actually enjoy this birthday in peace. And look back on quite a good year for Catherine, really.
Yeah, she's had a brilliant year. And she's had the coronation as well, where she just looked fabulous. And, yeah, she's had a great year. And, you know, she's running a tight ship with her family as well. And she's getting tougher and tougher as the years go by. And, you know, actually, Spare did her a favour, because in Spare, Harry wrote every other chapter about how Meghan was on the floor crying at this or on the floor crying at that. And, you know, there's always been this narrative from Meghan and Harry's camp that Meghan's the strong one and Kate's the weak one. But Spare portrayed Meghan as this kind of weak, sort of flailing character on the floor. And actually, Kate is the tough one that made Meghan cry. And actually, we are getting this picture emerging of Kate as a bit of a tough cookie underneath it all.
Well, indeed, I think we'd all like a reconciliation between the Sussexes and the Windsors, wouldn't we? Because these are human beings. Well, you're not so sure. But I would like if they could resolve things, because, you know, it's a shocker that Charles doesn't get to spend time with his grandchildren in California and the like. If there were some kind of peace talks, do you think there's any potential for Catherine to forgive Meghan? Could those two ever be friends again?
They were never friends in the first place, so I don't think so. Meghan, I think Kate could probably put on a good show if she had to, a bit like when the Queen died, they had to walk around the crowds together. Actually, that wasn't too convincing, but she might be able to do a more convincing double act if it came to it many years down the line and they ended up doing a royal engagement together again. I think she could probably put on a good show.
Whose fault is the sort of the division within that relationship? You know, is it Catherine? Is it Meghan?
Well, I think Catherine was quite cool towards Meghan and never particularly warm to her, but Meghan didn't give her any leeway for that. Meghan expected a hug on their first meeting, turned up with no shoes on.
Right.
I mean, if I met the future Queen of England, I would be wearing shoes for my first meeting. And
I'd wear heels, actually.
yeah, definitely. And it's a combination of Meghan getting offended too easily and Kate not being particularly warm and fuzzy.
And what people don't realise, and this is why I don't buy the kind of Meghan Markle sob story about the British press, OK? I've got many friends in Fleet Street. When Meghan Markle arrived on the scene, Fleet Street were delighted because they found, as you mentioned, they found Kate charming but a bit dull. And they looked at Meghan and thought, there's our new Diana.
Yeah.
She was the one that was storyboarded for, all of the fame and glory. So this is of her making, isn't it? Her exile and her losing out to Catherine, she can only blame herself.
I think so. I don't know if we thought she was the new Diana, but we definitely thought she was going to be this amazing, glamorous...
She made more headlines, didn't she?
Oh, she did it first because she was fresh meat. I mean, that's how it kind of goes. Is it of her own making? I think it probably is because she just couldn't give it time, and that's what we were saying earlier. Kate can give things time. She has that ability to play that long game, and Meghan wasn't able to, and she just tied herself in knots and burnt out quite quickly. You know, it kind of her star went like that and then down again.
Before you go back to your palace, paid for by the newspaper group that you work for, can I ask you about the recent poll that suggests the royal family not quite as popular as they might once have been? I think it was below 50% support in one particular poll.
Yes.
Is there anything to worry about, and is it the fault of Prince Andrew?
I'm sceptical about that poll for a start because it was commissioned by Republic. But say we gave it the benefit of the doubt. OK, so we are experiencing the post-Queen lull right now. So Charles has done a good job in his first year. He's made no massive clangers. Andrew's not helping matters. But I think as those young royals come up and they become incredibly glamorous, can you imagine Charlotte in 20 years' time? She looks just like the Queen already. She's got Kate's poise. She's the grandchild of Princess Diana. She's got Prince William as her father. You know, they'll come up and they'll grab the attention of the nation and will fall completely in love with the whole royal family all over again. And so I think it's a case of giving it time. I don't think the monarchy's going to crash and burn. It's only been a year since the Queen's died, and a lot of people just associate the monarchy with the Queen, so that kind of needs to wear off, that sort of association. And people will start becoming really fond of Prince Charles, or King Charles, as the grandfather of the nation. And I think slowly those polls will start coming up again.
That's a very cheery message. Listen, Charlotte, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch up again soon. You are watching Patrick Christys tonight with me, Mark Dolan. My thanks to the Mail on Sunday's Charlotte Griffiths. Now, coming up, we'll run through all of tomorrow's front pages. Hot off the press with tonight's passionate panel. But next, find out why Joey Barton is refusing to appear on this very channel and this show. That's right, this show is involved in what has become a Twitter spat. And yes, I'm involved too. So I'll be dealing with Joey Barton in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Mark Dolan in for Patrick Christys on GB News with you all week. Lovely to have your company. Now, before we carry on, a quick word about the ex-footballer and manager Joey Barton, who made headlines suggesting that ex-female pros should not be pundits on men's football. Some agree with Joey, some don't. So we thought it would be great to have him on the show and to debate the issue. Unfortunately, Joey broke with protocol and took a screenshot of my brilliant producer's text correspondence with his agent. My producer politely said that Mark Dolan is presenting all this week and would love to have him on. Well, Joey, who I thought was pretty thick-skinned, has tweeted the following. Can GB News please stop badgering me and my team? Well, that tweet has broken the internet. It's been seen by over 1 million people. And I'll be honest, I'm so confused because earlier in the week, Joey was speaking passionately about free speech. Well, if he believes in it, why doesn't he come on the show? Joey, over to you. It could be fun. I'm not an ex-footballer, but I do have balls. Now, folks, let's have a look at tomorrow's front pages. So many big stories to sink our teeth into, so let's get cracking. And we start with the Metro, and let's have a look at their headline. Of course, it's the only story in town, and it's the post office scandal. I've listened, I'm sorry, says former post office chief Venables. Paula Venables has given up her CBE after victims' 25-year fight for justice, 5 years on from leaving with £5 million and a CBE. 1 week after bombshell TV dramas, and as 1.2 million people sign a petition, shamed post office scandal chief Paula finally gets the message and hands back her gong. Also, the Epstein files, sex lies and videotape is the headline. Those bad headlines will not go anywhere. They will not go away for Prince Andrew. The Independent now, Andrew may have been pressured by the Queen to settle Epstein's sex case. And also, as disgraced former Post Office chief hands back her CBE and apologises for devastation to lives of hundreds of wrongly prosecuted sub-postmasters, now tell the truth about what you knew and when. Sun newspaper now, Post Office exclusive plea from Princess's postmaster. Kate stood by me, now I want justice for us all. A postmaster backed by Princess Kate and her family in his 10-year fight for justice demands today now overturn every conviction. This is the postmaster at the Middleton's village shop. And he said that they supported him a lot as he got a suspended sentence for false accounting. But it was, of course, overturned. Telegraph next. Architect of postal scandal demands immunity. IT expert who created faulty software has twice had his testimony to inquiry delayed. HRT, hormone replacement therapy linked to increased risk of arthritis. And Scottish parents face jail if they stop children changing gender. We'll have a look at that story as well. And the newspaper, who just come in hot off the press, post office scandal firm Fujitsu given VIP treatment to win major new UK deals. There you go. Well, look, let's get full reaction from my brilliant panel tonight. GB News superstar Nana Akua, former Environment Secretary Conservative MP Ranil Jayawardena, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Folks, let's get our teeth into this post office scandal. And we need to talk about Fujitsu, Rebecca, because they are the Japanese software giant responsible for this faulty Horizon software. The company is valued at £52 billion. Now, the compensation paid so far to the victims of this scandal, about £150 million, has been picked up by the UK taxpayer. Do you think Fujitsu should do more?
Of course they should. There is no question. Of course they should. They should want to. They should. Whoever is in charge of Fujitsu should be reading this and feeling awful and want to give them money. And then also there should probably be a conversation about how, when issues were being raised about Horizon, Fujitsu was still being given contracts. And I think I'm right in saying that's under that's under two different governments. That doesn't stop with one or the other. That is just a failure from everybody who was in charge.
Indeed. And what a sick joke, Nana, that after this terrible injustice, Fujitsu should be enjoying government contracts to the tune of £200 million a year.
Yeah, it's wrong. And actually, again, I said it before, that I think there's somebody should be potentially put in jail for some of this, because it's a scandal. And they are continuing to get contracts from the government. The government of both parties, you know, of the day at that time. Now we know about the situation, even though it was clear there was something going wrong. Why are they still awarding contracts? I don't understand that. I think all the contracts they've been awarded need to be reviewed, and I think they need to be dispersed to others, because they can no longer be given government contracts, because that's ultimately our money.
Has your Prime Minister, the leader of your party, done enough to grasp the nettle on this issue, Ranil?
Well, I think in fairness to him and to Kevin Hollinrake, the minister right now, Paul Scully, the minister who actually kicked off the inquiry, if it hadn't been for these guys doing this stuff, we'd still be in the situation we were in when Sir Ed Davey was the minister, or indeed Peter Mandelson before him. So, you know...
Is it not ITV, actually?
I think it's ITV.
Well, no, hang on,
It's the power of good drama, honestly.
Paul Scully, the minister in 2020, was the first minister who actually got it. You know, until then, all these ministers, this is 2020, so, you know, we're in 2024. In 2020, he was the first minister who got it. He was my GB last week, actually, because previously all the ministers had just believed what the Post Office had said. They'd just got the pieces of paper from their officials and said, yep, that's fine. And the official went, thank you, Minister. Paul Scully was the first one who said, you know what, this just doesn't feel right to me. We need to have an inquiry. And so, you know, I think that's...
So it took him 3 years then, and then suddenly the drama comes.
But also, don't you think
hang on. Paul Scully was the minister, he kicked off the inquiry. That happened immediately. That happened in 2020. It's only because of the inquiry that so much has come out. And the thing about Fujitsu here, and it's Fujitsu and the Post Office, a lot of the trials were based on this false accounting. Only you, the sub-postmaster, could put the information in. And it transpired that there was a backdoor, that the coding from Fujitsu, which is why it's on the front page of the Tell tomorrow rather, there was a backdoor that allowed someone else to tinker with data, and that fundamentally removes the basis for all these prosecutions, which is why it is now right that the government's looking to speed that up. But they need to speed it up more quickly. They need to make it easier for people to get their compensation.
But Nana is right, the drama...
It took a drama for people to actually take real notice of it, but Fujitsu should be sued, in my view.
I agree with
anyway,
you.
So that's...
Do you know what I think?
Rebecca?
Also, there had been there's either a dispatches or a panorama or both about it. And I think, honestly, it is a testament to the fact that one of the things we do best in this country is great drama and great journalism, because those are the only reasons this happened.
It's good public service broadcasting.
And that is why it's so important that we continue to invest in it. I don't want to get into licence fees and stuff, but that's why we have to continue.
Invest in the BBC?
Well,
anywhere
anywhere that makes good journalism and anywhere that makes good drama, because it's our best output, and it's.
And would you agree that should be the same in Fleet Street, where all newspaper titles are allowed to sort of pursue the truth?
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Whether it's the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, or the Mirror and the Guardian.
Desperately concerned about the sale of the Telegraph potentially having I think we're getting into issues we don't have time to discuss.
Yeah.
But I think I'm very proud of the way that the Post Office scandal has been changed by drama and by journalism.
Do you also share concerns about online campaign groups who claim to be against hate? but are really just against debate, who are targeting broadcasters and newspapers, do you condemn them wholeheartedly as well?
They have every right to say whatever they think.
Oh, so you don't
have every right to
condemn
not
them?
listen.
Yeah, but a lot of they're not. They're making stuff up though. I mean, you know, the Stop Funding Hate, for example, condemning GB News before we'd even broadcast a piece of output.
You either want plurality
I don't
or you
think
don't.
I don't think they necessarily said that. I think they have every right to object. They have a right to protest. They have a right to critique.
Seen. I mean,
I think
they haven't seen it. Though.
I think they objected to the marketing, and obviously I don't object. I turn up every week, but they object to the mission statement, and they have every right.
Well, so they've seen it now. It's not what they said it was. They shouldn't be allowed to carry on with it.
OK, a fascinating debate. Well, look, that one's no doubt going to rage onwards. Wait till you hear about this story. It's Scottish parents face jail if they stop children changing gender. We'll bring you more on that, more front pages, lots more debate. Also, as Idris Elba calls for an immediate ban on zombie knives and machetes in Britain, backed by our regular panellist Adam Brooks, I'll be crowning tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My panel have got some great nominations. And I'm delighted to say we'll bring you more details on how Veterans Affairs Minister Johnny Mercer is helping the military with important health issues. So it's quite inspiring. It will bring a tear to your eye. All of that is next. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Mark Dolan, only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, before the break, we were discussing Fujitsu's role in the post office scandal. That's the software company behind the faulty Horizon software. A spokesperson from Fujitsu has said the current post office Horizon IT statutory inquiry is examining complex events stretching back over 20 years. The inquiry has reinforced the devastating impact on postmasters' lives and that of their families, and Fujitsu has apologised for its role in their suffering. Welcome back to the show. Patrick Christys tonight with me, Mark Dolan, with you all week. Lovely to have your company. Let's have a look at some more front pages. And we have the Mail. And they lead with, now give back your millions as shamed ex-post office boss finally returns her CBE. Victims say, what about her vast bonuses and pensions? She was facing calls tonight to return £3 million in bonuses and pensions. And, of course, she has handed back that CBE. She pocketed as much as £5 million for being in charge during the Horizon IT scandal, in which hundreds of postmasters were wrongfully prosecuted and, in many cases, bankrupted. And what about that body, folks? What will Sarah Vine and Andrew Pearce say about Jason Donovan's bod at 55 and his black nail varnish? He looks pretty good to me. OK, Daily Express, rebels fire warning shot at PM over Rwanda bill. The Daily Mirror, shameful exclusive post office scandal. Innocent Peter lost his life. Marion lost the man she loved. Disgraced Porna Van Els has finally given back her CBE. Yet tech firm Fujitsu still earns £100 million from us taxpayers. Well, you can double that based on my research. The Times, PM faces more turbulence with the threat of another Rwanda revolt. Post Office chief to give up her CBE over scandal. And how about the Telegraph? So many big stories in the Telegraph. Architect of postal scandal demands immunity. OK. Reaction to all of the big stories from the papers. GB News superstar Nana Akua, former Environment Secretary Ranil Jayawardena MP, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Let's have a look at this in the Telegraph. Scottish parents face jail if they stop children changing gender. Nana Akua.
Yeah, it's shocking, isn't it? This is... you would have thought that the SNP would have learnt their lesson from what happened with Nicola Sturgeon, that we really... They shouldn't be meddling in this, and I know that this is almost a non-story because it's only kind of a suggestion or maybe not actually a real suggestion. But the bottom line is usually these things are bubbling under and there is some truth to them. And I would say it's quite concerning to give the power to the children to determine whether... Because you're putting the power in the children's hands as to determine if a parent says, look, you can't dress like this, we don't want you to do this, and so on and so forth. The parents could be put in jail, I think it is, for 2 years, potentially, if they intervene in some way.
So it's not... I think it's a very scare tactic-y headline. What's happening is conversion therapy is being made illegal, or trying to be made illegal, and therefore campaign groups have said, if it is regarded that a parent is trying to make their child not transition and make them live in the gender which they were born to, therefore it would be conversion therapy, therefore they could be found guilty, therefore they could go to prison. So a lot of things have had to happen here. So the issue here is that it's not helpful to conflate gender and sexuality.
Well, I agree, but on conversion therapy on trans, what will constitute that? Would it be a parent talking to their child and say, are you sure you want to do this?
No.
Is that
I think all sensible people would say no.
But that's what some of these guys...
None of this is sensible.
But the issue is we would all agree that the kind of conversion therapy that we all disagree with, which is things like electric shock therapy, often done by...
That's not what this is.
But the problem with this legislation is it's treating too many things that are not the same. There is a long history of gay conversion therapy being an abuse that is inflicted on children, and that we can all agree is wrong. Now, that does also happen with trans children. The problem is you also get parents saying, OK, you might feel that you're a girl and that's fine, you can wear a dress, but we're not going to talk about hormones, and that's not conversion therapy. And the difficulty with this legislation is finding where that line is.
Well, that's the problem. Who determines that line? And actually, I've spoken to a lady called Brianna Ivey. Actually, she's a man, but she went through the transition. And she did it when she was very, very young. So by 13, 14, she was given puberty blockers. And then eventually she went through all the bottom surgery when she was about 16, 17.
They don't do it under 18.
Hold on. Can I just say, what she said was this, and I give her the respect of calling her a she. She said she wishes that somebody had stopped her and said, for goodness sake, just don't do anything. She wanted somebody to intervene, and nobody did. In fact, they affirmed delusion in a sense. So who is going to be the adult in the room that will stop the children from doing
NHS policy is that there is absolutely no case to do bottom surgery or double mastectomy on anybody who's under 18.
Puberty blockers were the things that started the whole thing.
And puberty blockers are complicated because we do give people the contraceptive pill from the age of 12, 13 if they want it. Therefore, we are giving the same form of medication to children.
Not really. We know why we're doing it. No, that's not really true.
I personally...
Puberty blockers and the contraceptive pill are not comparable.
They're not the same.
They're both hormones.
Yeah, but
they're giving children hormones.
But they don't change a woman's physiology
They
for the
do,
rest
absolutely.
of her life.
No,
not irreversibly.
The pill?
No,
puberty blockers don't irreversibly.
Yes, they do.
It depends how long you take it.
No.
Also, there is not enough science to be able to say that.
So why are we giving them to children?
Listen, I wouldn't give them to children personally, just to clarify. I don't believe it's a problem with this,
children. With this, it means that if you step in the way as a parent and try and stop these puberty blockers being administered, then you could find yourself in jail.
This is the states becoming a third parent to their children,
but that's what
and it's outrageous.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I think, look, people said that we were overreacting with the Tavistock Centre. It got shut down. I think we have to push back on this woke madness.
Scrutiny is important, but it's not helpful to write it all off as woke madness. There is a middle ground.
It is.
There is a middle ground which allows the fact that trans people exist, as well as the fact that children shouldn't be having surgery.
For me, puberty blockers, there is no middle ground. They should be illegal for anyone that's a minor. Nana, let's get to your greatest Briton. Who is it today?
Well, my greatest Briton has to be Johnny Mercer for all the amazing work that he's been doing, hasn't he? I mean, it's fantastic. There was that brilliant interview with Chopper as well earlier.
Love that. Yes, great nomination. Your headline hero.
As another MP, or former MP, Lord Arbuthnot, James Arbuthnot, actually my predecessor in North East Hampshire, who fought doggedly for his, now my constituents, Joe Hamilton was one of them, to really expose this scandal.
Yeah, well done. Bravo. And Rebecca?
Also, thank you for explaining how you say her surname, because I've been saying it wrong all day. Mine is Idris Elba for calling for an immediate ban on zombie and machete knives, and also for generally his work towards trying to end knife violence. Obviously, there's a lot more to be done than just banning knives, but it is somewhere we can start.
Fabulous suggestion. Well, I'm going to give it to Rebecca and Idris Elba, great actor, and a great campaign, knife crime, a worrying epidemic in this country. OK, Nana, your Union jackass.
Well, it's got to be Carol Vorderman. OK, so for two reasons. For what she did with Sean Bailey, I didn't particularly like the whole sort of treatment that she's given him, even though I accept that his words were clumsy, but I felt that it was sort of a exercise in spin on her part. But also for her words and her treatment of Johnny Mercer. She's supposed to be a woke lefty, nice to people, and she certainly isn't that.
OK, how about your Union jackass?
Dr Alsea Assan, who unbelievably wants us all to wear masks to stop us getting a cold or a cough. What next? Locking us up in our homes to stop us tripping over?
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, I'm quite triggered by the issue of masks, so you've got me on that one. Rebecca, how about your Union jackass?
Mine is comedian Joe Coy for doing a nice throwback to the noughties where we just make sexist jokes about Taylor Swift. She reacted very clearly by saying that she wasn't amused by it, and we love that.
Indeed so. I mean, she is now the biggest star in the world, would you say?
Unquestionably. Well, her and Beyonce, shared.
Yeah, there's some concern about a US newspaper that was speculating on her sexuality.
A 5,000-word essay
none of their business,
about whether she may or may not be bisexual. If you care about Taylor Swift's sexuality that much, you need a therapist.
OK, Ranil, will a Conservative government ever mandate masks again?
Well, Conservative MPs aren't going to do it, I can tell you that.
Glad to hear that. In that case, you're the winner. I'll give it to Ranil for that ridiculous doctor suggesting that those masks will stop the transmission of anything, frankly, other than germs. OK, folks, it's all about opinions. That's mine. Thank you to my brilliant team, the other side of the glass, my excellent panel tonight, and you for your company on the radio and on TV. We'll do it all again tomorrow at 9 o'clock. But next up, I'm delighted to say, it's Headliners. See you tomorrow at 9.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. I'm Alex Deakin. Another cold one tonight and tomorrow. Quite a bit more cloud tomorrow over northeast England and eastern Scotland. Sunny skies definitely in the south. High pressure is still dominating our weather. Close to the centre of this high, we've seen some stubborn fog patches. The breeze